This is Embodied from PRX and WUNC. I'm Anita Rao. When Chionne first heard about sugar dating in college, she was intrigued. What if, in exchange for her time and attention, she could get enough money from a sugar daddy to pay her bills?
I was happy to say, you know what, I'm going to try it one time. If I don't like it, I'll never do it again. If it's successful, then maybe I'm onto something. And I was onto something.
B was a sugar baby on and off for about a decade. She'll tell us how that experience shaped her views on intimacy, money, and power. Plus, we'll talk with a researcher about the sugar daddy's perspective.
The sugar benefactors were getting a lot of companionship from it. It wasn't just sex. What I found interesting was that they really enjoyed this element of mentorship, and that was a part of it that they felt quite good about.
Inside the world of sugar dating, just ahead on Embodied. When Chionne was in college, she faced a common conundrum. How do you juggle classes and a job? She didn't want work that was too time-consuming, but she was also kind of broke.
I think I was just online looking up fast ways to make money. And then I stumbled upon an article from a sugar baby explaining her experience. And I was like, there's no way there's men out here that pay just to be with pretty girls.
Sugar babies are typically younger folks who have emotional and physical relationships with older partners in exchange for money and gifts. The transactional relationship between sugar babies and sugar daddies is called sugar dating.
I mean, at first I was just like, this sounds like prostitution. This doesn't really sound like something I can tell my mom or my friends. So I really had to bury a lot of that before I just said, F it, let's just go ahead.
B went on her first sugar date in 2016 and was a sugar baby on and off for about a decade. This experience fundamentally shifted her thoughts on money, power, and what she wants from her own romantic partnerships. This is Embodied, our show about sex, relationships, and your health. I'm Anita Rao. Sugar dating has surged into the public consciousness in the past few years, in large part because of social media. I personally have experienced disappearing down the rabbit hole of sugar baby TikTok.
Spend a day with me as a sugar baby. And of course, my sugar daddy just bought me a car. And obviously a cat to keep me company.
My current sugar daddy is this 58-year-old attorney.
These men want your attention. And if you can't keep that going on for a long period of time, at some point, they're going to turn their heads away and they're going to go on to the next sugar baby.
A lot of that content shows off the sugar baby lifestyle or offers practical advice. But that content wasn't really around when B started sugar dating. So she wrestled with most of her reservations about becoming a sugar baby on her own.
I was really just focused on being able to provide for my needs. And the thing is, I could have asked my mom for some help, but my pride just wouldn't let me. And so I compartmentalized those things I had that were in the front of my mind and said, you know what? I'm not the first one to do this. I'm not the last one to do it. Why not? And I've also just always had a mindset throughout my life of wanting to do whatever I wanted without regrets. Sometimes, you just do it for the plot. And I was happy to say, you know what? I'm going to try it one time. If I don't like it, I'll never do it again. If it's successful, then maybe I'm onto something. And I was onto something.
Did you have like a number in mind, like an amount of money that you wanted to get? Because I know I've done the how to get fast cash Google search before, and it usually takes me to the surveys, do online surveys for $15. So did you have a number in mind that made you say no online surveys, I need to do something else?
I think my main thing was I need to buy groceries. So I was like, if I can walk away with $100, I'm like, okay, I can buy groceries with this. I might have some money. Back then, the economy was so much better than what it was. So I had money left over. I can get my nails done, or I can get books for my classes. So I was like, $100 is my goal to know if it was good.
Okay, so you decided you're going to do this. You'd read a tiny bit about it.
Hmm.
How did you then go about like entering this world? I know the sugar dating landscape has really changed a lot in the past decade,
Hmm.
but back when you were kind of first looking, it was 2016. Tell me about
Yeah.
kind of how you got into it.
Within the research that I did, I also found different websites that I could use. And I was on a few, but the main one that I found the most success on was Seeking
Hmm.
Arrangements. At the time, it was Seeking Arrangements, and now it's just Seeking. And I had to sift through a lot of trash before I found a normal person. It really kind of deterred me a little bit because I'm like, all these profiles are fake, like, or they're asking for bank information and this is a
Mm.
scam, so it took a lot of patience and determination.
And how does it look? I'm thinking about like dating sites that I've been on where like you have a profile and photos and
Hmm.
information. Do you have as much information about the sugar daddy as they have about you, or how does that work?
It's an interesting psychology game because as a sugar baby, your profile wants to show you as this fun-loving, super young, beautiful girl that's just like all about fast life and you want to bring the youthfulness out in him. That's kind of what the goal is to portray on your profile. For the sugar daddies, they had a lot more leeway with
Hmm.
how much they put on their profile. There were some that they wouldn't even put a picture. It would just probably have discreet, private DM me because it was viewed like they had the power. So they didn't have to do more. They didn't have to be convincing to give us time. We had to be more convincing because there's more sugar babies out there than there are sugar daddies. So you want to be very specific with your photos, your verbiage, everything. It's really down to a science.
So, what did you know about your first sugar daddy before meeting up? Like, how much was available?
So I knew that at the time he was 37 or 38. And I was like, ew, that's so old. I knew what he looked like. He was a handsome guy. And we were able to chat and yeah, so I knew a little bit of what he did for a living. And then after that, it was just, okay, let's go to dinner and see what happens.
So, what did you do to prepare? It sounds like from what you're saying, like you had a little bit of the ick going in, like thinking that he was older, but you still decided to do it. So, talk to me about kind of your feelings and how you got ready for that first date.
Oh gosh. I did it so quietly, first of all, because I was still in my dorm. So I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. I also made sure I looked up the restaurant that we were going to because I never like to stand out in a bad way. Also, I'm a Black woman. And so even at that age, I wasn't ignorant to the looks of certain minorities being in certain spaces or even just being as young as I am, like how can she afford to be in this
Yeah.
five-star restaurant. So I was really conscious of making sure I portrayed myself in the most mature way possible to show I'm in this space because I deserve and I belong to be in this space.
So, you said you kind of kept it pretty private. You didn't tell anyone. Did you have any safety concerns about like meeting up with a stranger who was going to pick? I think he picked you up on campus, right? So, like being in a stranger's
Hmm.
car.
The moment he said he was going to pick me up, I was like, ooh, this is extra scary. I was really hesitant about it. And at that time, I was a novice in that world. So I didn't really feel like I had much of a choice. So I forced myself to just go with it and hope for the best, honestly. But yeah, I had a lot of reservations. I think the only thing I did say was I told my mom that I was going off campus with a friend.
Okay.
Definitely didn't tell her where because she would be like, how are you affording that? And questions I don't have answers to.
So, when and how did you all kind of talk about the terms of your relationship on the date? And how did that come up? Like, how did it shift from normal banter to like, okay,
Mhm.
what's our business arrangement?
Yeah, it was in the middle of dinner. He kind of just went straight at it and said, so what are you looking for? And I knew from my research that was basically, what are we doing
Uh
here?
huh.
It was really awkward for me. I'm not going to lie. I think that was the most awkward part of it because I didn't feel right saying, I want X amount of money from you for this. It was really uncomfortable for me. So I kind of handed it back to him and I asked him, like, what do you want? What are you looking for? And I kind of tried to use what he was expecting to calculate in my head what I think it was worth. But yeah, I kind of just let him lead the reins with that conversation because it was so weird for me. I didn't know how to carry it out.
So what did you all decide? Like, was it just this one date, or what terms did you agree to?
So we agreed to I would get paid for my time, like going on dates like this. So even if it's just like a dinner date with no benefits after, he would give me like $100 just for my time. And if we decided to take things further and be intimate, maybe like 500 a week, or we would do something monthly. I think we landed on a weekly arrangement agreement.
So how long did that first relationship last? Do you remember, like months or?
Honestly, I think it's so crazy because when he dropped me off back at the dorm and he held my hand saying goodbye, I got grossed out and I never talked to him again.
Oh, wow.
It
Okay.
was, I don't know what it was when he held my hand. It was really icky to me. And I was like, I cannot have sex with this person. I can't do it. But that was the first instance of where I dipped my toe in the pool. And I was like, I need to do a little bit more digging physically because I also wasn't that intimate when I was at that age. Like I wasn't experienced in sex. So I felt like I needed to get more experience with sex before I could dive into this like with both feet.
Just ahead, we'll talk about how Bea got back into sugar dating and how this experience has shaped her thoughts about power and intimacy. You're listening to Embodied from WUNC, a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. You can also hear Embodied as a podcast. Follow and subscribe on your platform of choice. We'll be right back.
It's easy to know you want to make a change in your life, but it is hard to actually do it. How to Be a Better Human from TED is a podcast for when self-help feels too daunting or just not for you. I'm Chris Duffy, the host of How to Be a Better Human, and trust me, I do not have it all figured out. But join me as I talk to experts about actually attainable ways we can try to improve our lives. Whether it's facing fears, setting boundaries, cleaning your house, or all sorts of other topics. Find How to Be a Better Human wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Embodied. I'm Anita Rao. Today, we're talking about sugar dating. It's typically a relationship between a younger person and a wealthier, older person. The younger sugar baby provides emotional and often physical companionship to the older sugar daddy in exchange for gifts or financial support. Chionne first tried sugar dating a decade ago. At the time, she was in college and needed money for living expenses while she finished school. But after her first sugar date, she realized that she wasn't quite comfortable with having a sexual relationship with a sugar daddy. So she hit pause. Then, 2 years after graduating, she decided she wanted to try sugar dating again to help pay for the lifestyle she wanted in DC. And this time, she took a different approach to physical intimacy.
I was more comfortable in my own skin at that time. So when we did get intimate, I was able to compartmentalize more than I was before. It's kind of like it's really weird to explain it like this, but in the moment, I feel like I kind of removed myself, like I wasn't in my body. And then afterwards, and then it was all done, that's when I kind of like came back. And I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. But it wasn't that bad because I didn't feel like I was experiencing it. It was just like somebody else.
Is that like I guess when I hear you say that, I think like about that being a trauma response. Did it feel traumatic or did it just feel like, I don't know, how were you thinking about that?
No, it didn't feel traumatic at all.
Uh-huh.
It just felt like it was kind of my way of separating sex from emotions because I never wanted to get the two mixed up in my own personal life. So if I was dating a guy that I actually did like and it wasn't a sugar daddy, the sex that we had was for us. It was emotional. We were in tune and it was all about us versus having sex with a sugar daddy. I felt like I didn't want him to have that type of access to me wholeheartedly. And so that was the way I was able to make a clear distinction between the two.
Did you think about yourself as a sex worker?
I did not. I really didn't, and I still don't, to be honest. I don't really consider that sex work. I know by definition, if we're talking about sex workers, right? We think, anything transactional involving sex, you're a sex worker. Whether you're on the street on as a prostitute or being a sugar baby or call yourself an escort, it's sex work, sure. But at the time, I didn't consider myself a sex worker. I just considered myself a girl who met a bunch of guys who I could take advantage of, who wanted to provide something for me. I could provide something for them. And that's it. I really, a lot of people put it in that sex work category, and I completely understand why. But I just personally don't, because at the end of the day, I feel like we're all having sex in exchange for something, even if it's not straight out cash on the table. There's a girl out there having sex right now for a promotion, but she's not considered a sex worker. There's a woman out there right now having sex in exchange for like reassurance or love, and that's an emotional transaction, and that's not considered sex work. So I don't put myself in that category because I feel like we're all using sex to our advantage in some type of way.
When you say that, it brings me back to something you said very early on, which was like when you were first talking to that person on that first date, you viewed him as having all the power in that situation. And when we're talking about like sex and power, and you're saying like someone having sex for a promotion, like that's obviously the person who they're having sex with is in the position of power to decide whether or not they get the promotion. Like that's problematic. But how does the power piece happen in your mind? And like, how were you thinking about that at this time that you were kind of more comfortable as a sugar baby? Did you feel like you had the power? Did you feel like it was shared power?
I felt like it was shared power, but still leaned more in favor of him because I associated money with power. So because I was the one in need of that resource, I felt like he had more power. But it gradually changed as I became more experienced and just more mature and understood how the world worked a little bit more. But yeah, at that time, it was definitely a little bit more shared power.
So how much of your time and like income were you getting from sugar dating as opposed to other kinds of work as you continued to get more into it?
Well, straight out of college, I wasn't really able to get into a career that I enjoyed. So I was living at home, and of course, I wasn't paying rent or anything like that. I lived a very comfortable life, by the way. I think a lot of people have this misconception too that sugar babies, they have like a rough life and they can't do anything. I lived a very privileged life. I went to private school my whole life. Like I grew up with a single mom. Like she provided everything I wanted and more. So it was more just so my pride wouldn't allow me to go to my mom for what I felt were frivolous things. So at that time, I wasn't working in my career field, but I also didn't have huge financial pressures or burdens on me to feel like I needed to like make a certain amount of money so I could live and just get by. So when it came onto my finances as a sugar baby, I think I was just making whatever I felt like I wanted to just do things I wanted to do without having to ask my mom for money.
Do you have a sense of like what your monthly or yearly salary was from being a sugar baby at that point?
Monthly, I would maybe say I want to say maybe 2,000 a month.
Okay.
It depended on how like active I was and into it with whatever guy I was with at the time. So I would say maybe 2,000 at that time.
So then in around 2019, you moved to LA. This point, you're in your mid 20s?
Yes. I was around like 23.
23.
24,
Okay.
Yeah.
So how were things shifting for you at that time in terms of like the balance of time you were spending sugar dating versus other kinds of life and work stuff?
At the time, I was in survival mode because that was the first time I was away from home. And though I could still rely on my mom financially, again, my pride, I didn't want to. I made this huge leap to go to LA just because I wanted to change my scenery. And so I was like, I have to make this work by any means necessary without compromising myself too much. And so in the daytime, I was a writer, an entertainment writer, and doing social media. And then at night, I was bartending and doing bottle service. So I was providing for myself just to get my foundation set. And then once I got my foundation set, that's when I got back into sugar dating. Because I needed to create my life so I could also create a realistic expectation for what I need from the sugar daddies once I did get back into it.
That reminds me of a line that you wrote in a piece about sugar dating. Okay, you said, I must keep a firm grip on reality by being aware that I'm selling a fantasy. So I want to know more about this line that you have to walk as a sugar baby. And I guess particularly like when you're in the fantasy realm, what are the things that you are doing? What is the version of yourself that you are performing for these sugar daddies?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm really mimicking them because as I got older, I've realized they have a little sociopath in them. I mean, they do. They're very narcissistic. They love themselves. And I found that when I would mimic men and kind of just show who they are with a mix of giving them the woman that they want, that was kind of just like that manipulation that I needed to do to gain their trust and gain favor. So that's where the fantasy kind of came from. So if I'm with a guy and he's asking me like, have you ever, traveled to the Bahamas before? And I'm like, no, I've never been. Like, what's it like? It sounds so beautiful. I've only seen it on pictures of it online. I'm Jamaican. I grew up in the Caribbean, so the Bahamas is nothing to me. But to him, that's something impressive. So I stroke his ego and I allow him to think that he's impressing me. So things like that.
So are you lying? Like, or I guess, how do you think about that?
Yeah, you lie.
You lie.
I mean, men wake up lying every day. They wake up, their eyes open, they breathe in, they lie. That's how I view men. So at the same time, I look at it as a business. It's a business. I'm trying to gain you as a business partner. I have to stretch the truth a little bit. I have to paint a really pretty picture for you to say, you know what, this is a really good, business partner for me in this realm of work that I'm in. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you can consider it a little bit of lying, but it's not in a malicious way. It's nothing, it's not hurting anyone. Everyone's benefiting.
This is like a full performance. Like you're basically creating a character. You're playing this character. How do you navigate the line between that kind of performance and your own very real boundaries about what you do and don't want to do, what you do and don't feel comfortable with?
So now I'm a lot more firm in my boundaries because I carry myself with the mindset of what you won't do, another man will. So for me, I have that confidence in when I create a boundary and I'm firm in that. I'm not as worried about if I say no, then he's never going to talk to me again. That was a concern. That was an insecurity of mine before. Now that I'm older, I'm like, some men like a little bit of a headache. So I don't mind saying no with a lot more confidence. And I'm more selfish mentally. I'm more selfish physically. I'm more selfish emotionally because I have to protect myself at the end of the day, no matter how good a sugar daddy can come off, no matter how pure and genuine. At the end of the day, he's for himself and I need to be for myself as well. Like being mindful of that reality, it really helped me kind of just like shape the way I come about my relationships with them.
Once you were kind of in this rhythm full time in your 20s, how did that affect your own personal romantic relationships and your ability to kind of pursue those things in your personal life?
At first, like I said, compartmentalized. So I would date guys, regular guys who weren't sugar daddies. And the bar was really low for them, like very low expectations. Because at that time, too, I wasn't really dating for a relationship either. I didn't really start wanting a boyfriend until I turned about 27, 28.
Mm-hmm.
So even then, I was just having sex casually and going on dates casually. And if I liked a guy, I liked him. If he disappeared tomorrow, then I'll find another one tomorrow too. So that really wasn't much of an issue. I wouldn't say I put them all in the same category, but emotionally, I didn't have any ties to anyone. So it wasn't really hard to separate the two. Once I did kind of start getting a little bit more serious with one guy in particular, my expectations for men was raised drastically, like expecting a certain level of respect, and also not being as forgiving. It gradually changed. My experiences with sugar daddies affected my relationships with regular guys. And I think in a positive way because it made me feel like I just deserved more in both aspects.
So you're saying getting closer to a particular sugar daddy made you change what you wanted from your personal life?
Yes, absolutely. It made me definitely raise the bar, like in standards of where we went to dinner, the type of car that I would like him to have, his financial stability, his ability to provide. I wasn't dating for potential. I wasn't looking at potential. That the word potential makes me want to throw up. I wanted a man who had it already and is growing on it, that it raised in those ways.
How about the emotional piece? Because I imagine like as a sugar baby, you've said compartmentalization a lot. So like you're compartmentalizing, you're not revealing your full emotional self to them. But in a personal relationship, you probably want to. Like, was it harder to let yourself be vulnerable in your personal relationships? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and still is. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very self-aware, and so I know my weak points when it comes on to emotional, not even connection, but just like expressing myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't really created by the sugar daddies, to be honest. The wall I have emotionally with men was created by the men I dated with actual intention.
Mm.
So those were from like the genuine heartbreaks and cheating and just like emotionally abusive situations. Those are the experiences that created that wall for me.
Did they know you're a sugar baby?
No.
Okay.
I didn't tell them that. They would never be able to deal with that. And so I shielded that aspect from them. They knew, however, they did know that I was someone who liked the finer things. They would see my car and know, you have to match this. There was an intimidation that was kind of like unspoken, though, for sure.
So you're living these like many different lives. You say you're good at compartmentalizing, but how about like your friends and your mom? Like how much at this point, like how much do those people that are really close to you know about your sugar dating?
So now all of my friends know about my life. They know every detail, every funny story. They know because I don't have any shame in it anymore. My mom, I protected her from it because my mom is very modest. And I think she also has the mindsets of the whole sex work correlation. So my mom wouldn't outright say, yeah, my daughter's a sugar baby, but she understands that there are men out there who appreciate her beautiful daughter and they want to spend money on her. And I mean, I'm 32 years old. She's not naive to the point of knowing I'm definitely having sex with men. And before, she probably would have been very judgmental, but now she's a lot more accepting. And, she actually has conversations with the guy that I'm dealing with now. Like, sometimes I'll be on FaceTime with him and they'll have conversations with each other and I just leave the phone with her and they'll be talking on their own. So we've come a long way. But yeah, my relationships are very open. I'm an open book with everyone.
We talked earlier about power, and you said you thought sugar daddies kind of held the power because they have the money, but some of your thinking has shifted. Tell me about that shift and especially kind of how you think about the money piece of all of this at this point.
So that shift came, I would say, when I was meeting up with a guy and he wanted to meet me on his boat. And I was like, absolutely not. Sex trafficking is real. You are insane. And so that was my first hard no. We need to, revisit this. And he respected it fully. And I was like, oh, he's accommodating. And so by experiencing that, I just became more comfortable with saying no. So the safety aspect really is that's like the highest priority for me. So I started sharing my location with my friends and my mom. I let them know, like, there are some friends where I would send the guy's profile to them or send the guy's phone number to them so they would know exactly who I was with. Before that, I was like, I don't want to be a stick in the mud. I don't want to come off like I'm just like this immature little girl who's scared. But now I'm like, I don't care about any of that because I only have one life and I refuse to live it, recklessly in a way and then get it cut short just because I was doing something for fun and I was worried about how a man would feel. Being worried about a man's feelings over my safety, that will never be me ever again.
Just ahead, we'll take a break from Bee's story to learn more about the sugar daddy perspective with a researcher who studies sugar dating. As always, you can hear the podcast version of this show by following Embodied on your platform of choice. We'll be right back. This is Embodied. I'm Anita Rao. We're going inside the world of sugar babies, sugar daddies, and sugar dating today. These kinds of relationships have been around for a long time. As far back as ancient Greece, you can find evidence of older, wealthier folks compensating younger people for companionship or sex. But sugar dating has gotten much more visible in the past several years because of social media. And as more people are talking about sugar dating, researchers are also beginning to take note. One of those interested researchers is Lauren Cormier. Lauren is a PhD student in clinical psychology at the University of New Brunswick. She studies human sexuality and relationships. Like Bee, the former sugar baby we've been talking to, Lauren also first learned about sugar dating while on a college campus.
I feel like I've been on university campuses forever. And so there's always this sort of whispering about sugar babies paying tuition through sugar dating. And so I think around 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic first hit and everyone was staying home, there were these concerns about finances for a lot of people. And I think these alternative forms of relationships just became kind of maybe more interesting, maybe a little bit more talked about. I think within the past 5-6 years, there's probably been an increase of media attention on sugar dating. And sugar dating actually stood out to me because it is a relationship model where structure is unusually visible. It's typically talked about. It's embedded within it. So these expectations are often explicit rather than implied. And I just found that incredibly interesting because there's not a ton of research on it.
What really pulled me, especially to your research, was that you all weren't just trying to talk to sugar babies, but you wanted to talk to sugar daddies as well. So you all sent out these surveys about sugar dating to both sugar babies and the people who hire them. You had about 77 people who met your criteria. I'm curious to know what you heard about motivation from the sugar benefactors, the people paying for this, and what surprised you based on what your assumptions were going in.
I think what we found was that the sugar benefactors were getting a lot of companionship from it. It wasn't just sex. They actually wanted to spend time with a young, beautiful person. And what I found interesting was that they really enjoyed this element of mentorship. A lot of them stated that they enjoyed helping a young person get to know more information about business or know how to get ahead in the world. And that was a part of it that they felt quite good about. Some others of them were married and they believed it was a good alternative to divorce because their sex lives were not as exciting within their primary relationship. And so this was something that they could do to still feel young and enjoy that part of their lives without destroying their home life, essentially.
Tell me more about the relationship structures that you heard about. We learned from B that even she had so many different experiences, from just kind of a one-off date to a longer term relationship that involved, much more and physical intimacy. What was kind of the range that you heard about in your pool?
Oh my gosh, there was a huge range. And I'm actually happy to hear that B's experience sort of matched that. And we did have some people who were more pay per meet. And we had people who were in years-long relationships. And I believe we had at least one sugar baby who stated that they were hoping that their sugar relationship would turn into more of a what they called vanilla relationship, more of a traditional relationship structure. So sort of seeing that relationship change over time because they were so committed to each other and because they did enjoy their time together so much. So really, we did see that large range.
How about the power piece? Because in a traditional relationship, I guess they're all different. They're all different ways that a power exchange or a power dynamic can look. But we talked to B a little bit about this. Does money equate power? And she said at the beginning, it really did for her. And she really felt like the sugar daddies had more power in the relationship. But over the course of relationships and over the course of her time doing this, her thinking has evolved, and she's been able to kind of say no and draw more boundaries and think of it as a more equal power exchange. What did you all hear about how people thought about power in the relationship?
We really heard essentially what B is saying. So as researchers, I have to acknowledge my bias. I assumed that it really would be the older, wealthier partner, usually the man, the sugar daddy, that would have the most power. He's got age, he's got experience, he's clearly or presumably financially stable enough to take on this type of dynamic intentionally versus this intentionally seeking a younger partner who, could be more naive, could be more or less experienced sexually or even in the world, in business, who might actually have a true financial need. And so that in my research background, I would have assumed that that would be a clear power differential in favor of the sugar daddy. But we asked them about their perspective of power. And what we found was that both the sugar babies and the sugar daddies found that the sugar babies had the most power. So these women were essentially saying, I know what I have. I know, my body, my time, my companionship is valuable. And I can ask for what I want. And these sugar daddies were saying things like, the pool of sugar babies is so much smaller than the pool of potential sugar daddies. Like, yes, I have the money, but if she doesn't like me, or if I go about this the wrong way, she could always find someone else.
That's so funny because I think B said kind of the opposite, like there are more sugar babies than sugar daddies, but then also that she felt like if someone wasn't kind of giving her what she wanted, she could move on to someone else.
It is very interesting. And I think that's the thing about perception. We don't actually have a good prevalence estimate of who is engaging in these behaviors. I think because of probably the stigma and because it's still a relatively new area of research, we don't really have any clue about who is engaging in this and how many people are. And so there does seem to be this perspective of the sugar daddies that sugar babies could find someone else because, you know, there's so many sugar daddies. But really interesting to hear that B had the opposite perspective. I would love it if one day we could put that to the test and really see what is out there.
I want to talk about the other pieces of how these dynamics play out. You talked about sugar daddies saying there was a mentorship component that they enjoyed. There was a companionship component, but there is also physical intimacy. I'm curious how much that came up in your research and what you learned about kind of, do they think about it as sex work? I guess from both perspectives, the people paying for it and the sugar babies.
It's such a good question. And I think that the answer is it depends. Some people would say, yeah, I'm probably engaging in sex work. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't see it in that way, even when they're describing these arrangements as pay per meet. You know, I tend to have the philosophy that you get to identify whether you are a sex worker or not. And so if you don't think that you are, and it's technically a part of this unique type of sugar dating relationship, then I suppose it wouldn't typically count, even though one might think a pay per meet and you're having sex is sex work. But the core component of companionship, I think, is really what makes sugar dating stand out. Because you could easily flip it and say someone who goes on a one-night stand and they particularly sought out an older, wealthier partner because that's what they were attracted to. If they had sex with this person and they had a general expectation that he would pay for things and maybe get her gifts, would we call that sex work? I don't think so. And so it is sort of up for discussion and then sort of up for debate, but we left it kind of vague.
How about the benefactors, like the people that are paying for it? Do they think about it as paying for sex work?
No, I think what we found was that they really believed that they were paying for companionship or paying for shared time. One sugar daddy even described it, I believe, as I get to date above my league by contributing financially. So he's not even saying like, I'm paying for sex. I'm paying to date, basically. Like I'm paying to sort of get into the game if I'm a less attractive man. So they even tend to describe it as a relationship.
How safe do folks feel in these relationships? Like, what did you hear about the concerns that come up around these dynamics, if any?
I think it varies. I think what we found was that the women, sugar babies, did have more concerns about physical safety and the potential danger of physical harm or being taken advantage of. And so they took more precautions than the sugar daddies did necessarily. So they would always tell a friend where they were going. They would have their location on their phone. They would try really hard to vet sugar daddies beforehand, before actually meeting up in person. So they took these precautions, but we did find that they tended to feel more safe once they got to that step. I think because there's so much communication and explicit negotiation at the outset of a sugar dating relationship, as opposed to maybe traditional dating, you just sort of name a time and place and show up. There's potentially more risk in that because you're communicating less with a potential traditional dating partner than you would with a potential sugar dating partner.
As a researcher, I'm curious about kind of what keeps you pulled into this topic. Like, what do you think we can gain from looking at this more deeply or thinking more critically about this type of exchange and this type of relationship?
I think there's a couple of things that we can take from sugar dating research. One, I think it's important just in terms of our own knowledge. I think it's really important that we have the actual research, the numbers, so that we can either back up our assumptions or challenge them, so that we can have this actual information so that we're not just getting things based on what we're exposed to and how we might interpret that. Also, I think that just the explicit negotiation of power and exchange and terms of a relationship is something that could even be taken from sugar dating and applied more broadly into traditional dating. You know, sugar babies are getting what they want and sugar daddies are getting what they want because they know what they want and they're presenting it up front. I think not necessarily that in traditional dating you go on Hinge and say, I want you to pay for my apartment, but to know what you want and to be able to express that at the outset, I actually think is something that traditional daters could find useful.
Has it changed anything about how you date or how you think about power doing all this research?
Actually, yes. So I was single while I was going through, a bit of the dissertation proposal process. And so I'm taking, what we've learned from our initial sugar study and trying to come up with a new way to expand on the sugar dating research. And I'm on the apps like other women in their late 20s and early 30s and thinking about like, yeah, maybe I will just authentically say like, this is what I want. This is what I need. Honestly, it was effective for me in the end. I'm happy with my partner who I found, and I think that we're quite a good match. I think some people found it probably off-putting, but I mean, in the end, I'm satisfied with the relationship that I have, and I do think that being authentic was a key part of that.
Lauren Cormier is a PhD candidate in clinical psychology who has been studying sugar dating. After learning more about Lauren's research, I had one big question for B. How does someone inside the sugar baby community feel about researchers and journalists paying more attention to sugar dating culture?
It's a double-edged sword because I love girls who find a way to make a way. This is a very patriarchal centered society, but I feel like the more popular it is, it's painted really pretty and the dirty reality isn't shown enough. And so a lot of girls go into it thinking that it's just all butterflies, rainbows, and every sugar daddy is going to just give you what you want when you want it. And that's not the case. And it's not for everyone. And I would hate for girls to get into being sugar babies and not having that self-awareness yet, and then experience a really grimy side of it and cause trauma to themselves. So I just wish they would tread a little bit more lightly and do more research before they go full throttle.
Do you think anything can be gained from talking more publicly about sugar dating?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of girls start off like me feeling like they don't have much of a choice or they don't have a voice in what they want or feel like they're not supposed to put themselves first because they're supposed to be pleasing the man because he's the one who's providing. And that's not the case at all. And I think if we had more conversations, I feel like more stories with women like me who've experienced and grown from it, those girls will see I don't have to fall at the mercy of this man because he says so. You hold more of the power than he does. You just have to recognize that and own it, and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. But also, would I want my daughter to be a sugar baby? Absolutely not. if she came to me one day and said that she was a sugar baby, would I be heartbroken? I would be sad, but I also would not judge her because high pot on kettle.
You can find out more about B, Chionne, and Lauren Cormier at our website, embodywunc.org. You can find all episodes of Embody the radio show there, and make sure you're subscribed to our weekly podcast. Today's episode was produced by Kaya Finlay and edited by Amanda Magnus. Sarah Nix provided additional editorial guidance. Adesina Newkirk is our intern, and Jenny Lawson, our technical director. Quilla wrote our theme music. This program is recorded at the American Tobacco Historic District. WUNC is a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm Anita Rao.